Hello, I'm Anya Lichtarowicz, and this is Somewhere on Earth. I'm in London. It's Tuesday, January the 20th, 2026. Welcome to the Global Tech Podcast. Coming up today. Two very different stories, but both about what's really happening behind the scenes. First, artificial intelligence. From ChatGPT to Copilot, AI feels instant and invisible, but the infrastructure behind it is anything but. Data centres, specialist servers, cooling systems and power grids are expanding fast, and so is their environmental footprint. Now research suggests AI systems may already be producing carbon emissions on the scale of a major city like New York, while the water used to run and cool them could exceed global bottled water consumption. But can we be sure of the real impact if the biggest tech companies still reveal very little about the true cost of running AI at scale? Then we turn to healthcare, and a problem that's far more human. It's called medication non-adherence, when patients don't take prescriptions properly. In the US, about half of all patients fail to follow treatment plans. Worldwide, the cost runs into hundreds of billions of dollars, and for conditions like high blood pressure alone, around 100,000 people die early every year because medication isn't taken as prescribed. Now researchers think technology may help, with a dissolvable electronic pill that can confirm when a medicine has actually been taken. It's safe, biodegradable, and could save money and lives. Two stories, one question. How do we use tech wisely when its impacts reach far beyond what we see? This is Somewhere on Earth. Today we're talking about artificial intelligence, not what it can do for us, but what it costs the planet. Whichever AI tools you use, it feels instant and almost effortless. But behind every prompt is a vast physical system of data centres, servers, power grids and cooling infrastructure, all drawing electricity and water at enormous scale. Our guest has been researching the real environmental footprint of AI. Their latest work suggests that globally, AI systems may already be responsible for carbon emissions on the scale of a city like New York, while the water used to run and cool these systems could exceed total worldwide bottled water consumption. The problem? The companies running this infrastructure don't say much about what's really happening behind the scenes. So how do you measure something where it's almost impossible to find the data? Alex de Vries-Gao, the Digiconomist, has done exactly that, and he's published his work entitled The Carbon and Water Footprints of Data Centres and What This Could Mean for Artificial Intelligence in the journal Patterns. I asked him how he did it.
So in my latest article, I actually thought I would follow up on my previous research that quantify the power demand of AI systems globally. And coming from there, it's actually a very logical follow-up question to ask, like, okay, if you quantify the power demand of AI systems globally, what does that mean in terms of environmental impact, specifically in terms of carbon footprint and water footprint? So I set out to try and make some statements about that. It's incredibly difficult, but let me start with the conclusion. I found that AI systems globally are probably over the past year responsible for as much carbon emissions as a city such as New York. And at the same time, the water consumption related to AI systems is likely exceeding our total global bottled water consumption.
Wow. I mean, bottled water, people have for quite a few years, certainly in Europe, been eschewing it, by saying, look, no, we're not going to have bottled water, we're going to have tap water, we're going to have reusable bottles. So that's quite alarming that you're managing to compare it and say, actually, it's going to be worse than that.
These numbers are quite a lot. And the thing is, in order to get to them, it's really a big challenge, because the main issue here is that the tech companies that are ultimately running all of this equipment, they're not telling you anything. They are really giving you minimal information about how the systems they're running, in what data centers, how the data centers are performing, like what's the carbon intensity of the power they're consuming, the water intensity of the power they're consuming. It's really hard to find any of those metrics at all. So I tried to gather as many as I could and make some statements based on everything I managed to find, and even doing some additional calculations to really figure out these numbers. But yeah, I think the real issue here is that the tech companies are ultimately, they are the ones who are running all this AI hardware in the first place, but they're just not telling us anything about what is the impact of what they're doing with these systems.
So tell me, how did you come to your numbers? If you had to kind of do a lot of digging, where did you dig and what did you uncover?
A lot of those numbers that you typically see being cited, they're coming from the International Energy Agency, they're coming from the Berkeley lab in the US. And a very big issue I have with those numbers is that they're typically based on proprietary sources. So there's analysts with data somewhere that's being used by the International Energy Agency, the Berkeley lab. They have information on server shipments, they have data on new data center build-outs. But none of that is public information. So I really wanted to take the public information as a starting point, so that at least whatever I put down can be verifiable. That's the big issue when you're using proprietary sources. You can't verify anything. It needs to be transparent. I want things to be verifiable. So I started to look at, well, the number one source you have in that case, which is the sustainability report of the big tech companies themselves. Like I mentioned, those companies like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Meta, they are the big buyers of this type of equipment, specialized AI servers. So if you take their environmental report as a starting point, you can ultimately derive something from that about the carbon intensity, about the electricity that they're using for their data centers, but also for their AI systems, and also the water intensity. So, of course, I also reference past academic research on this topic. I cross-reference with that. And this way I managed to gather enough information to at least make some statements about the carbon intensity and water intensity of the data centers of these big tech companies, which likely apply to their AI systems as well, as part of those data centers. I think a very big challenge here is that when it comes to AI, none of those tech companies really specify which AI systems they have running where. And if you want to know exactly what is the carbon footprint of these AI systems and the water footprint of these AI systems, that is information that you really need to have. But yeah, if that's not available, your next best source, your next best approximation is through the data center general performance of these companies. You will find that even that is in some cases very limited. It really varies. The landscape is very diverse. You have companies like Meta, and Meta is actually doing quite a decent job at reporting. They're even reporting power consumption at a data center level, so you can quite accurately determine exactly what's going on with the carbon footprint and the water footprint of their data centers. They even report their indirect water consumption. We can get to that in a moment. But then there's other companies like Amazon, which are like, on the opposite end of the spectrum, disclosing almost nothing. You can't find anything about the total energy consumption of Amazon, let alone Amazon Cloud. I'm just mentioning it to this so you can get a feeling, or like, okay, it's really hard to find these numbers.
So the numbers are very well hidden.
Yeah.
But what about, I'm kind of thinking about our listeners and thinking, well, let's be honest. I think more and more of us are using AI, and more of us are using AI day to day. And I think a lot of us would be interested in finding out exactly what potential energy use, carbon use, water use, we're doing by putting something into AI instead of writing it ourselves, for instance.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, my ultimate numbers show that this whole impact of all these AI systems together is becoming quite significant. So this is definitely something that you would want to be aware about. Except the big problem is when you're using these applications, and it actually doesn't even matter if you're using AI or other digital applications. Typically, the real world impact that those applications are having is never tangible. Whenever you're interacting with ChatGPT or Copilot, it doesn't tell you like in the screen like, hey, hold up, your interaction right now is responsible for this much carbon emissions and responsible for this much water consumption. It's just not there, and there's no way to get this information. The tech companies won't tell you. Yeah, it's the same issue. They're not disclosing this type of information, and it's really tricky if you're an end user and you're concerned about this impact, because we can see the total numbers going up, and you might be like, okay, to what extent should I be using this type of applications? But it's really hard to make choices there if you're not getting any information about what's really going on in the background.
And that's an issue, isn't it? Choices, because I know that your previous work, for instance, on cryptocurrency, and and you gave us numbers about the different types of currencies, Bitcoin obviously being very much a headline, and their huge energy use, and how there has been change in that particular market. Ethereum has now moved to a much more green option, is certainly in comparison to what it was. And there has been change. But it seems to me as though AI is speeding along and, bringing us all these huge apparent advantages, yet
Yeah.
it seems to be even more hidden than the crypto was.
Yeah, actually, yes, because the thing is, with the crypto mining, you had a few values readily accessible on a daily basis that you could quite easily use to come up with estimates of the impact of this network. Like, for example, you could observe the total computational power in those cryptocurrency mining networks, the total global computational power, and having that number, you can quite easily on the back of an envelope, calculate what that could potentially mean in terms of global power demand. You could do this really every single day. Actually, this is what I have been doing for years. I've been providing that number on a daily basis on my own website, Digiconomist, and also others like the Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance have also launched a similar type of index to showcase the changes in the energy consumption of the Bitcoin network. Every single day. So that's really easy. But then we're talking about AI, and AI is actually, in terms of total impact, is coincidentally at the moment probably quite comparable to the impact Bitcoin mining is still having today. I think people kind of started to forget about Bitcoin, but it's still there.
It's very much there. Yeah, absolutely.
It's still responsible for consuming a significant amount of resources. But AI is now getting to the same level. And I do want to note here that with Bitcoin, that one has probably hit the ceiling for now. But with AI, well, there doesn't seem to be a ceiling so far. So there's a potential to go a lot further there. But it's also different in the sense that you don't have those public values. You can't observe the total AI computational power globally every single day. It's not something that's there. It's not something you can work with. So what I had to do previously was I had to dive into the AI server supply chain to first of all quantify how many AI servers could have been produced, and then from there figure out how much power could all those servers combined consume. And now, coming from there, I wanted to attach a number like what does that power consumption mean in terms of emissions and water intensity. But this is a very it's a very complicated way of coming up with a number, whereas this was actually relatively easy for cryptocurrency mining. So transparency is definitely even more of an issue on this topic, and the numbers are probably also going to be more of an issue pretty soon, because like I said, AI is in terms of impact now becoming pretty comparable to Bitcoin mining. But yeah, Bitcoin mining, that's pretty much hit the ceiling. But AI, the investments keep flowing in. Data centers are continuously being built out to support further AI infrastructure growth. Over the past year, the power demand of AI systems doubled. So did their environmental impact. So it's unlikely that growth rate will just plummet to 0% in the next year.
So AI's impact is now approaching the scale of Bitcoin mining. The technology keeps expanding, data centers keep growing, and most users have no idea what's happening behind the screen. You can hear more from Alex in the Pod Extra edition of the show. One of the biggest challenges in modern healthcare may not be inventing new medicines, but making sure people actually take them. It's called medication non-adherence, and the scale of the problem is enormous. In the US, around 50% of patients don't take their medication as prescribed. In parts of the developing world, that figure is close to 30%. The result isn't just poorer health, it's costly and deadly. In the US alone, non-adherence costs the system more than $100 billion a year. And for just one common condition, high blood pressure, an estimated 100,000 people die prematurely every year because medication isn't taken properly. So could technology help close that gap? A team at MIT has developed a dissolvable electronic pill system that can confirm when a medication has actually been swallowed. The sensor is made of cellulose and zinc, which all break down in the body, and the tiny chip will pass through your digestive tract and simply come out the other end. It's only a few millimetres in size, so you won't even notice. I spoke to mechanical engineering professor Giovanni Traverso, who led the team behind the work. So could a smart pill change how we manage treatment, support patients and save lives?
This would be inside of a capsule, and so you wouldn't even see it. You'd still take the capsule. The drug is still in there, but you have essentially the sensor that senses when the capsule has been taken.
And do you use radio frequency with all of this?
That's right. So we also wanted to minimize the size of these systems. And so batteries certainly add space and volume to objects. And so the technology that we used is similar technology that is present, for example, I know you're based in the UK, so for example, the Oyster card that someone might tap as they're entering the tube. So those technologies have a small chip embedded, or those cards have a chip embedded, and that's an RFID system where essentially as you bring that card close to the receiving end, you're able to power a chip on board, and that sends a signal. So similarly here, you have this dissolvable electronic system that essentially, once it reaches the stomach, it dissolves, but there's an antenna, and the antenna can essentially receive energy from the outside. So you have a sensor on the outside, and then it communicates saying, yes, the capsule has been taken, and I'm here, and confirming basically the successful ingestion.
This could be really useful. I kind of thinking about maybe elderly patients who might be getting forgetful, and say, their child or their carer could monitor this on, say, a mobile phone to say, hey, yes, I know that person's now taken their medication. That's great. Instead of going and saying, hey, Mum, did you take your meds this afternoon when I was at work? Did you? It does seem like a very simple yet sensible solution.
Absolutely, and I think it can help many people, certainly the elderly. I think also folks that are suffering from neuropsychiatric conditions where the condition itself can essentially affect one's ability to remember or ability to remind themselves to take the medication. I think it can also help people, for example, who've undergone procedures where taking the medication on a frequent basis at a specific time can really be critical to their health. So some examples there are, for example, organ transplantations, so individuals who require medication to support those transplants, or individuals who've undergone specific cardiac interventions, so where medications have to be taken to ensure that the blood is thin enough and not clotting, essentially, to really preserve the function of, let's say, a stent. So I think there's several populations that it could really help. And what we know is that a lot of these drugs, that when they're studied very carefully in clinical trials, are extremely efficacious. But of course, if people don't take them, the drug's not going to work, right?
And so I'm assuming that it would also flag up with your local doctor that says, exactly, hey, Anya's forgotten to take her medication again. Can someone get onto her and remind her?
Absolutely
or can
right.
she come in and let's have a review?
Absolutely. And I think that looking after someone, really involves a village, right? I think you certainly have the person that you want to empower, but of course they have a support network that includes their family, that includes their healthcare providers. And so I think technologies like these really enable and empower sort of that support structure to really help that person.
And how big is this capsule? Because obviously, swallowing is an issue for people, and I can't imagine a whole electronic system that's able to. It just makes me kind of think that might be a hard or a big pill to swallow,
So, no, this is the size, like a stick of gum. It's like half and much thinner, but it's like half the size of a stick of gum, and it just rolls up inside of a standard capsule with the rest of the medication. So you're not adding a new device. You are adding a new device inside, but the capsule itself is not changing size.
So
it's like a thin piece of paper. Yeah.
Okay, so when I would get my medicines, I wouldn't actually see anything different.
No.
Oh, right. So, and that would also hopefully help adherence, because a lot of people, if the manufacturer changes and the pills have gone from pink to blue and white, they're not sure if they should take it because it's different and when it's not. Yeah. So that kind of overcomes that problem too.
Yes. I think that the device itself will have to undergo regulatory approval because it is a medical device, but the way it's incorporated, it is sort of essentially like a thin piece of paper that is rolled up inside of a capsule that you wouldn't even see.
And to reiterate, it is completely and utterly safe for me to swallow.
That's right.
So what are the next stages now, Gio?
Yeah, great question. So we're actually continuing to work on this system. This is being supported by a federal entity here in the U.S. called ARPA-H. So we're gearing up for a clinical trial in the next 2 to 3 years to test these systems in humans. And then we'll continue from there to try and get these to patients and be available.
And how does this kind of play into the bigger field of smart medicine that's out there at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So, these are systems that can be connected. So they can connect with a medical record. They can, as we discussed, help integrate in general more complex systems for care. And, so they essentially they are a tool or a spoke, if you want to think about it in that way, in the connected world that we're living in, and how we're trying to help people live their best lives.
We're very grateful to Gio as he took time between seeing patients when on call to speak to us. He's also a gastroenterologist at Brigham and Women's Hospital, and you may have heard some background noise during that interview. That was him in a very busy doctor's office while attending. And that is all for this week. Just a quick reminder that we have all the shows on our YouTube channel, so please go and check us out there. Also, you can have even more soap with the Pod Extra version. Please search pod.fan Somewhere on Earth podcasts. Go to the page and subscribe. $10 for lots more soap. You can also get in touch with us via hello@somewhereonearth.co or via WhatsApp on +44 7486 329 484. The production manager is Liz Toohey and I'm the editor. Until next week, bye-bye.